So that's 8. So does anybody think that, measures implemented by the National Probation Service are punitive?
Yeah, certainly. Well, yeah, no, they are, or they can be. I think it all depends on how the person on the other end's handling it. But in my case, anyway, Adam, as you know, we spoke before about it. I registered for the Homes for Ukraine scheme, and I was accepted onto the scheme, and I have, because of a phone call from the Moscow department, the council has stopped the application, even though the government said I was okay to sponsor a Ukrainian. The council have stopped my application because of a phone call from the police and probation services. And I'm now having to struggle to try and fight for this Ukrainian that's waited 3 weeks for the council to come and do a home visit and whatnot. And if they weren't so strict on the thingies, I mean, I've even lowered my risk from high to medium risk before thingy, and before I even applied, I'd checked with probation and the police to make sure that I was okay to sponsor, and to make sure that my past didn't affect my chances of getting accepted for sponsorship, because obviously I knew how important it was going to be to the man, his name was Fedor, that I was going to sponsor, how important it is for him, because obviously he's now stuck in a war-torn country waiting for a visa or another sponsor to get a visa to England now. And had my restrictions not been as punitive as they were, or they have proven to be, then the thingy, because I say, it wasn't the government that thingied, it was the council that have thingied and that have blocked it because of a phone call from the police stating that things would flag up on my DBS check. So like I says, it's certainly stopped me from moving on. And like I says, rehabilitation is all about doing things that the normal person would do. So how can I do that when yous won't allow me to do it? Do you know what I mean?
So when people are being advised, that they need to be displaying pro-social behaviour and everything like that, when you're trying to do that, one phone call from probably somebody who's never met you.
Exactly. It's what my RMO said to me. He says, look, it was somebody that doesn't even know you. Do you know what I mean? It's just, it's flagged up that I've applied for the scheme and whatnot. The council have applied for a DBS check for me, and they've then, instead of just doing the DBS check and thingy, they've contacted the council and says, look, there's going to be markers coming up on the DBS check, and the council have just stopped the application there and then. Do you know what I mean? So they don't know me from Adam. And
as opposed to working with the individual, they've just done something based on paper at the end of the day.
Yeah.
Well, I don't suppose anybody's got anything positive to say about probation to sort of counter that a little bit.
Well, yeah, my probation officer, she's awesome. Charlene, I can counter her straight away for you. I can talk to her, and I've spoke to her throughout this ordeal, and she's very supportive of me, and do you know what I mean? But yeah, so like I say, it's not all bad. It's just certain parts of it that we all know needs improving, has needed improving for years. Do you know what I mean? Of course. Like we all know, the matrix used for the Oasis has been out of date for centuries. Do you know what I mean? So they still use that to get your risk level and stuff, and they shouldn't be. Do you know what I mean? So yeah. I'm going to shut up now, Adam. I'll let somebody else chat.
Right. It's clearly not accurate, because drawing upon my own experiences, my time on licence expired when all the COVID regulations were in place in June last year. I remember probation occasionally coming out to do so-called home visits. Well, for a duration of that time, I lived about 4 stories up in a flat, and I used to blow a kiss off my balcony. And how's that a home visit? Anything could have been going on in that little flat of mine. You know what I mean?
I know, it's what I'm saying. But this is the system, innit, Adam?
You know,
That's why we're here, to get it changed.
Things are
Positive
there to
changes.
tick boxes for some reasons, but there has to be a purpose to what people do, you know. So I don't suppose anybody actually can think of what license conditions are always necessary, or you know, or anything basically to sort of say why certain things are in place. But with what Frankie's just said, what's the point in somebody saying yes to something if the other hand's going to say no? Very quiet crowd tonight.
Looks like we've got quite a group.
No,
but yeah, but like actually, I don't know. It all depends on the individual, because like, say, like obviously you've got certain groups of criminals, so like terrorists, for instance, I would agree that they do need GPS tracking on release, because obviously they'll still pose. Do you know what I mean? So I suppose your restrictions should be based on like your individual crime and your risk management, your risk level. Do you know what I mean? But it shouldn't just be generated because like by the norm. Do you know what I mean? There should be personalized. Do you know what I mean? There shouldn't just be a generic like they normally do. You've got your box standard set of license conditions. They shouldn't have them. Every license condition should be generic to that person. Do you know what I mean? And then that's your license. Do you know what I mean? You're not doing just a standard license, and then them rules apply to you and you only. Do you know what I mean?
Because everybody's character's different at the end of the day, you see.
Exactly. So
there needs to be more, in my opinion, more of an element where probation actually get to know the individual on license. But unfortunately, it would seem as though their resources don't allow that. Because at the end of the day, how can you decide license conditions for somebody who you've never had a proper chat with or never met?
Exactly.
But then the problem, which what prison often does to people, it socially conditions people to say what somebody wants to hear in order to tick the right boxes. I'll never forget my first appointment with probation after release. We went through a long form, and the lady said, "Oh, so what's the likelihood of sort of, you know, doing something you shouldn't do?" I said, "Well, quite high." I says, "I just don't know." I said, "You know, I says, people break laws on a daily basis without even realizing it." I said, "Everybody breaks the law regularly." You know, I says, "I might be in a hurry somewhere and go a little bit too fast in the car." You know, you just don't know, do you? Nobody's perfect. But I think there's this general expectation where people are actually being sort of told that they have to convey themselves as though butter wouldn't melt in their mouth, which is that's not how the world works at the end of the day, you know?
No, and most probation officers can see through behaviours like that. Do you know what I mean? I think most probation officers know. Do you know what I mean? Know the difference between somebody coming in and just saying, "Yeah, all right, let's get this done and over with," than somebody actually coming in and saying, "Look, do your job."
Of course.
Do you know what I mean?
Hello, Lee. Thank you for joining us.
Hi, Adam. Still I'm a bit late. I was a bit of a problem getting in, mate.
Well, we've just been putting the world to rights with regard to our license conditions being punitive. I don't suppose, is there any chance you have something positive to say about probation?
Bit of a difficult one, that, isn't it? No, be honest with you, Adam, I just finished my license last week after 2.5 years. And I noticed the difference in probation officer when I moved office to a different part of the West Midlands. So it can often boil down to a bit of a toxic environment within which the probation staff work. Because when I first came out of prison, I had a real problem with probation. We're always at loggerheads, and then I moved office, as I said, and she listened to what I had to say, which I hadn't experienced before, and we got off on the right foot. And it was a real eye-opener, because I was expecting it to be that constant head banging until the end of the license, but it wasn't. You know, it was quite easy in comparison.
It is quite nice when you work with somebody who is proactive, and personally I can relate to that about moving house. Got a brilliant probation officer, moved house, and everything seemed to take a step back, and I felt like I was viewed, with deep suspicion about everything. And then I moved back to my home territory, and I breathed a sigh of relief. And when the license was over in the last few months, that was it, but I suppose it must come down to the culture of management maybe within the National Probation Service. So if people have got a hot-headed office manager or somebody who doesn't sort of display much empathy, people may then, be a bit fearful of their manager and think, oh, hang on, we must cover our backsides here. Whereas a more humane approach is taken, because mistakes are going to happen. At the end of the day, they're never going to be able to get it right about everybody.
No, they're not. But the problem is when it does go wrong, who gets hanged out to dry?
Exactly.
It's usually the ones at the bottom of the ladder.
It's a bit like the, what was it, a couple of years ago, the Fishmongers Hall attack in London. Probation approved what he did and, to go and attend. But at the end of the day, surely it was that person in question who carried out the attack who's to blame more than anybody else, And if somebody's sort of being seen as a model prisoner who's rehabilitated and doing everything right, probation can't say no to everything, because where's the incentive for people to actually behave and comply, if you know what I mean?
I don't think there is one answer, that one size fits all with this one, because as I see it, the problems with the license conditions begin very early on with the Oasis and the sentence planning and the changes in people along the way. They all add a little bit to the story, and then you end up with a license condition which kind of feels heavy-handed and not tailored to the needs of the individual. And that's really, I mean, that's why I came today, to hope there's some kind of a discussion around that.
It's exactly what I just said, Lee, before you turned up. Me and Adam were just talking about how outdated the Oasis system is, and I said my personal thing is everybody should have individual license conditions, not like get rid of the generic license conditions. They do not work. It has to be an individual choices made on that person. Do you know what I mean?
I think it's supposed to be like that, Adam, isn't it? It's supposed to be a tailored event.
Well, there's the generic conditions on the, what they have to follow.
Yeah, the standard ones.
The standard conditions, but and you've also got your additional conditions.
Yeah.
And I was also reading some template wording lately for bespoke conditions, which is quite interesting in certain instances.
Yeah.
But is what you were just saying before about a sentence plan. Wouldn't it be better if it was a release plan? Then at least people could actually be working towards release and towards, in most cases, sentence expiry. Because that's the important.
Well, yeah, exactly. I mean, the sentence plan should be that. It should be for the duration of your sentence, not just the time you spend in prison, which is perhaps how some people see it.
Yes.
And I mean, yourself, having read the documents, the sentence plan targets are supposed to be workable. It's supposed to be like, there's a smart sort of acronym within there somewhere, isn't there? It's supposed to be specific. The first word is specific. I mean, that kind of is not general. It needs to be for you as an individual and to help you move through the system and to get out and to live like a pro-social life. And that's supposed to be how it works, but it often isn't.
Exactly. It's a bit like sort of license conditions being reasonable, necessary and proportionate.
Yeah, absolutely.
Sometimes when you see a curfew on somebody's conditions, but somebody's never been in trouble at night time, they're not out getting drunk every night, putting bricks through shop windows and things, they've been charged and convicted of something which allegedly happened in daylight hours. Yet in many cases, they get a condition, confine yourselves to a premises between 7 p.m. and 7 a.m. You think, how is that linked to a person's conviction a lot of the time,
Yeah. Well, it's not. It's the heavy-handed approach. You get the feeling that probation are trying to cover their own back as much as they are trying to ensure that the individual doesn't reoffend.
Yeah,
I mean, I get that because of the pressure put on them by government. If something goes wrong, it's their job on the line. I see that, but it shouldn't be like that because it's risk reduction, not risk eradication.
Exactly. No, that's exactly right, to be honest.
Yeah.
Because you can't eradicate risk, can you?
No, you can't. Not in society where we live. No, it's impossible.
No.
I think that's been lost on some people.
Yeah. Should have actually run a poll at the start, but I'll run it now. And if everybody would like to cast their vote on there. I'm sure.
Yeah, very much a subjective thing, hasn't it?
We're getting a fair few votes, and we've got 9 votes out of 13 so far, and nobody's actually said no yet. They still haven't. So that's quite interesting, to be honest. We'll end at 11. There's 3 more people to vote if you're there, please. If not, we'll end this poll. Give it a couple more seconds. And that now, just share these results. Can everybody see that? Anybody's unsure, there's always the opportunity to get sent down for a few years and do a bit of time on license to get a feel for the conditions attached. But when you're in prison, you hear a lot of inmates who will often speak positively about the system, but then afterwards, when anybody gets recalled, it's always blamed on the probation officer. Now, of course, there's going to be a lot of times where, it's natural, it's human nature. People will be set up to fail now and again. These things do happen, but a lot of the time people actually fail themselves. That has to be acknowledged as well, But how can the communication be there between both parties?
I just think it's more the overall treatment, because I think when you go through the system, you've been released from prison, not often end up in a hostel and whatnot, then you're always seen as a criminal. They always say you're going to do bad. They don't see you're going to do good. And like, if you're a couple of minutes late for your curfew, like 11 o'clock, you're supposed to be back for what have you, and you're a couple of minutes late, why recall somebody for that? Do you know what I mean? It's a couple of minutes. Do you know what I mean? Anything could have happened. Do you know what I mean? Yeah. I just think that just some people in that position just like to stick to it. They are too punitive. Do you know what I mean? They just, like I say, what's the point? Means you're just passing the buck on. You can't be bothered to deal with them and do your job. Do you know what I mean? Try and get that person the help they need, whether it's drug help, housing help, mental health help, whatever they need. Do you know what I mean? Instead of just going, right, well, you're causing problems, see you later, you're going back to jail. You know what I mean? So, like I say, they are, some are supposed to, do you know what I mean? Like you say, it's a tricky situation, but to me, they are too punitive. Like you say, I've been through the system like you, Adam, and like I say, with my current situation going on, I can't say nothing else because it's thingy. And I've just got an email there to say, will you take part in a survey for the Homes for Ukraine scheme? Do you know what I mean?
The irony is, Frankie, I mean, we were neighbours once upon a time, and I've probably got a worse neighbour across the landing from me now in the flat where I live. You know what I mean?
Probably. My neighbours love me. I'm nice and quiet. But yeah,
it's true. If a joined-up approach is taken, people will actually, if somebody can get rid of one issue in their life, other problems may also go away at the same time. Yeah. But it's an awful thing. I mean, again, I remember being on 11 p.m. curfew. I was living at home at the time, so it wasn't the end of the world. It wasn't like I had to sign in. But I was at an event down in Liverpool, and the train got cancelled. Then the next one was absolutely rammed. And I probably did get home a little bit late that night on a Saturday night. But who was I meant to call on a Saturday night? Who was going to pick the phone? And
exactly.
How would you actually explain that? Just for life getting in the way, to be honest, because that's what happens. Trains do get cancelled. People do get delayed. It's not something we plan for at the end of the day. And even today in daytime, remember a staff at New Leaf down here in Birmingham tried to ring one probation office for somebody, and it took loads of attempts to get through to the office on the phone. That's in office hours and daytime. So there has to be a line of communication open, because again, like people in the outside, there is good proactive probation officers. There's not so good ones. Some respond to texts, some respond to emails, you know, and a lot of us don't. I remember one probation officer saying they weren't allowed to respond to emails, and another probation officer saying, "Oh yeah, if you go away overnight, just email me your booking confirmation and things so we can keep things right." Great. You know, that's proactive. That's a common sense approach. Because if you go on booking.com, if you want to wait for somebody to approve where you're going to stay, you log back on the next day and it's £20 more expensive.
Yeah, exactly. Oh, it's like you says, it's one of them questions that I suppose everybody's going to be different for answering. Do you know what I mean? Like the poll's just shown there, most of them are unsure, but yeah, it's like I say, in my eyes, it's certainly it needs altering big style because it's too punitive. You do the slightest little mistake and you're back in front of a judge, and why you're wasting taxpayers' money and stuff as well. Do you know what I mean? Because obviously all of this is going to cost the taxpayer money. Do you know what I mean? Instead of wasting your time on frivolous recalls and stuff, try and help that person in the community like you're supposed to be doing. Save taxpayers' money and whatnot, and stop shipping them back to jail. Do you know what I mean? Reduce that tax, and then you reduce that, and then you've got more money to plough into prisons to rebuild, to get the job done that's supposed to be done in prison. You know what I mean?
If I can just pick up on something that Frankie just said there.
Yeah.
As I see it, one issue that surfaces quite frequently is the trauma which underpins alcohol and drug use. They're not very often high enough on the list of priorities. So you know, people, professionals, whether it's probation or some other drug support network, they have this plan where they deal with the substance misuse itself, take you through a program, and then you end up at the end of it either on methadone or clean entirely. But along that way, there's very little by way of understanding as to why you got onto the drugs in the first place. It isn't often tackled at a serious enough level so that when people do actually come off, there is something to fill that void.
Yeah.
And it's not just left as a void that they need to fill themselves.
I do think they are sort of addressing that at the moment. I do know that there's been talks about more mental health people for substance misuse because, like you've just said, the trauma that they've now started to recognise that if we don't deal with the trauma that caused them to go into whatever substance it is that they're misusing, then they're just going to keep on repeating the cycle. So, like I said, I think that is starting slowly. Adam might know a bit more than me about it, but I think that is sort of trying to drip in, but it's the prison system. It's always last to get improved, unfortunately. So, yeah, but good point.
But on that journey, go through the prison and probation system, when a person is released, and I went into an AP for a while, about 7 weeks or so I was in one for, and there wasn't really a way to sort of demonstrate that you're just leading a sort of good life, if you know what I mean. There's very strict rules around alcohol and things like that, and a few years ago, it was the 14th of December, I got released, and I was out and about doing a bit Christmas shopping for the family, and there was a bottle of wine in the shopping. And I thought, oh, I can't take that back to where I'm staying because that could land me in hot water. Well, you know, I was too tight to put a £6 bottle of wine in the bin somewhere. So I got one of my mates to burn £10 of petrol to come and pick it up and drop it off at home for me instead, you know. So you think, how can people sort of just display sort of that they are just getting on and reintegrating back into society, if you know what I mean, where you're stressing out over a little thing like that.
Right, exactly.
You know, it's sort of the people who are on unapproved premises are actually adults at the end of the day, and people choose how they conduct themselves and how they lead their lives. So you think, it shouldn't be any different really to how a group of adults would behave if they were working away, say, and you've got your bedroom and you're just somewhere with strangers, So we need, rather than an institutional feel to an AP, because going into an approved premise has actually felt more institutional than certain aspects of prison, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, yeah.
It was very, very hard to say, oh, this is life, this is what we're doing. I remember the day after I got out, walked down the stairs and in the approved premises, and the lady says, "Where you going to?" I says, "Oh, I'm going to the Lake District for the day." I says, "Some friends are outside picking me up and taking me out for the day." She says, I'll just check your license conditions to check you don't have to come back for the day. I said, "Well, I don't." I said, "That would be my fault if I did, And it was just this whole viewed with deep suspicion. And I said, "No, I just want to walk up a mountain. I want to get my walking boots on after 2.5 years. I want to go up a mountain. Yeah. I want to get a pint of proper beer down my neck, and I want a pub dinner." Normal sort of things which seem to be forgotten about. And just because somebody's been through a system, it doesn't mean that they don't just live a decent lifestyle, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
And I'm probably going to be on a bit of a rant and a tangent myself here, but maybe in many instances, there could be a lot of scope for peer-to-peer support for people to actually say, well, no, let's try and help you get your life on track,
Yeah.
I mean,
certainly.
Lynn's just popped a question in the box there. I don't know if anybody's able to answer it. How can they police your movements all the time? It's not really possible, but exactly.
They can't. It's impossible, but their job is to help guide you, help support you. And I'm probably speaking for the majority. If you go and ask your probation officer for help for anything, you get a generic response. All right, I'll see what I can do for you. I'll find out if there's anything that can be done for you. And then you get no help at all. 3 weeks down the line, you're still waiting for a food parcel through the door or whatever it is you've asked for. Do you know what I mean? So they can't police you all the time. It's just like we say, that communication between you and that. If you can trust your probation officer and you build up that relationship, then they don't have to police you all the time. Do you know what I mean? That's not what they're there for. Do you know what I mean? They're just there to guide you and support you. But how can they guide and support when they don't offer you it? Do you know what I mean? Or they don't give you it?
I see Lee's just popped in the chance. Another favourite is I'll ask my manager, and somebody I was working with last year, what got that out of it was HMP Doncaster he got out of in South Yorkshire. The chap lived in West Yorkshire, and he had to go to an approved premises for a while. But he had his own home to go back to. But there was some work being done on his house. And probation said they couldn't allow him to go home until he had hot water and everything like that, his new boiler put in and everything. So he lined up a friend's house to go and stay at over Christmas time when his time in the approved premises came to an end. Probation officer went off on holiday for a fortnight. So the babysitting probation officer turned around and says, "Oh no, I can't approve your friend's house just yet," and sent him about 50 miles down the road to Sheffield to a different approved premises. Yes. So putting somebody with strangers in a different area, and it was just a case of, it did appear that somebody already probably had a busy workload, so just say no, and then at least that way it keeps everybody right when that person's probation officer is back, then see about getting him home. So after his first Christmas in 5 years of being away, he was looking forward to spending it sort of with friends and family close by to where he lived. You had to go 50 miles away,
Yeah. How are you recalled? How does that come about? Basically, that comes about if your probation officer doesn't like you. I mean, most people get recalled for stupid reasons, like I says, they've come into an approved premises drunk or under the influence of whatever substance and they're causing a nuisance, or you're generally late for 5 minutes because the bus was delayed or the train was delayed, whatever reason. Do you know what I mean? That's most likely the reason for most recalls, but there are recalls that need recalls, like somebody's committed another offence, like say somebody wasn't supposed to access the internet and he's been found with a mobile phone with internet access. He's getting recalled because he's breached his license. He's done the negative thing. He's resorted back to offending or re-offending the same offence. Whereas, like I says, coming in drunk, if you're drunk, tell him to go and sleep it off. If he's not sleeping it off and causing problems, then get the police involved. But you don't always have to first chance you get, go boom, free call. And
that's it, because
that's the system. That's how it works.
What Lee's just popped in the chat there, Lynn may be asking about the process, because if it's just minor sort of infringements, it is meant to be, you know, a sort of so many warnings a person's allowed, which are valid for a year, and then that could trigger a recall review, or if something's serious, it can trigger a recall. But like I've spoken to a lot of people, if somebody's compliant and they're a few minutes late for an appointment one day, that wouldn't warrant a recall unless there were serious grounds to concern in most instances. But like Frankie's just said, see if somebody comes in with a you know, stinking a drink, with a hangover or whatever. How many people walk into their offices on a Monday morning, hungover to death, stinking a drink, saying, "Oh, it was a wild night out last night." You know, years ago, you know, I remember working as a bus driver in Newcastle years and years ago. We had one old bloke every Monday morning. He used to ring in sick because he knew that he'd be randomly breathalyzed in that depot. You know, I think who's got the hand? Tom's got his hand up here. Tom Sculler.
Yeah, thanks, Adam. If I could just ask a question, I've got nothing to contribute here. I should say I'm chair of the Prisoner Learning Alliance, so I'm just here to learn very much from you. But I just wanted to ask, how far is it part of the probation officer's role to interest or support in the direction of education? Do they give any pathways to colleges or learning? Because I was interested in, I think it may have been Frankie's point about the sentence rather than just the prison sentence. It should be the full extent of that. And that, so I'm interested in what happens after release and whether the probation officer, in your experience, is committed to helping people to access learning opportunities. Sorry, that may be a bit the side of the main thing.
Really interesting, to be honest, Tom, because you know, people should be signposted towards education, and often education is a person's way out of a situation as well, you know, because knowledge is power at the end of the day, isn't it? But I think the general consensus is among a lot of people that probation now, the onus is on managing risk, and that's what, you know, that's their sort of priority. And I don't know if there's actually time for the other bits and pieces. I remember when COVID first came into effect, you know, and so many people were working from home, and my Twitter feed gets clogged up with criminal justice stuff, and it'd be great to switch off from it sometimes. But I was seeing things where, you know, probation officers had their kids holding up little posters and things saying, you know, "My mummy keeps the public safe," and everything like that. And it was all about, you know, it was all about protect the public, manage risk and everything. And I didn't actually see anything out there about, you know, what can we be doing to actually help people progress on this journey. I mean, out of curiosity, have we got a probation officer in the room, so to say, here? Or has anybody been signposted to education by probation?
No,
I have. Can I quickly sort of share this with you? I made an application to study with the OU while I was in prison. One hurdle after another kind of ended up, I was so close to release, I had to defer it for a year. When I got out, I kind of pursued it. And picking up on what Adam just said, the OU had to send a document to probation about risk and all these kind of questions, and then probation was supposed to send it back, and then the OU would then assess your risk and assess the extent to which you would be allowed access to various sort of platforms within the OU sort of network. In my case, she didn't send it back, so it was a battle throughout to gain access to the resources that I needed to do my modules. I gave up in the end, Tom, because it was just, it's like the fight itself was consuming so much of my time. I had very little energy to do anything else. And I don't think that's unusual. I think that's quite common Because as Adam said, risk management has become, so kind of overarching that very little else is of any importance. Public protection,
Seems to be the case a lot of the time, unfortunately, and so sad. Johnny's just asked, how far do you think progress could or change could be made for the recruitment of people with lived experience as probation caseworkers? Well, you've got the Going Forward into Employment initiative with HMPPS, where we share vacancies for now and again, and we are recruiting case administrators and what's the other one? Community payback, community service supervisors and things like that.
Yeah.
But there is quite a strict criteria over who's eligible to apply. And again, that's all down to risk management at the end of the day. But that could raise the question of, if somebody's in prison and an organisation what's supposed to be allegedly rehabilitating them won't employ them at the end of their sentence, well, probation clearly doesn't believe in rehabilitation for a lot of people. So where's the incentive for a lot to comply on a journey through the system?
Adam, it's not about. It is about rehabilitation and resettlement and reintegration. I mean, that's the narrative. But as we know, that's kind of taken a back seat to this idea of public protection.
Yep, exactly.
And while we're focused on that public protection, anything else is going to be kind of on the back burner.
Second best.
Yeah, second best.
It's the actions of the minority who actually spoil things for a lot.
For the majority, yeah.
I mean, Angela's got a hand up here.
Like Tom, I'm an interested party, so I have no direct experience, but I work with somebody who is in prison at the moment. And I'm curious. I see from the outside it seems appalling that the rehabilitation, etc. But I just wondered, what role do or could some of the sympathetic employers play in working with probation officers? I mean, I use the age-old Timpson example, but if employers like that, they from the outside, I understand that they know how they have learnt to work with people and to be very supportive. Is there any way that these employers, and I see Tesco is one of them, they have the experience of working with people, and I don't know what the success rate is. I would imagine it's fairly high. So for them to take another step, sort of not backwards, but if they could reach in and be working with probationary services, do they have the skills and the knowledge about how to work effectively and positively, so they could actually do some good, but nearer to people actually being inside and then coming out?
There's a long way to go, and there's initiatives in place, where organisations do take people on, but there's still an awful long way to go.
Yeah.
Unfortunately.
And then you've also got the contracts with the prison, like DHL, and I think, is it still Hilton's that get the bed sheets pressed and whatnot? A lot of them will take prisoners on when they get released as well. So you've got like sort of them, but yeah, it's few and far between. There's not enough chance opportunity inside of prisons to be able to get yourself into that position, if that makes sense.
Right.
I think as well, there could be a bit of a postcode lottery as well, because I'm down here in the Midlands at the moment, but I've actually got more contacts in this sector in the Midlands and in London in the southeast than I have up in Newcastle where I live. And I think in certain parts of the country, certain organisations are a lot more proactive as well, you see. Thomas?
Yeah, just a couple of bits and pieces. People are talking about probation trying to do rehabilitation and stuff like that. In my experience, that's not on their radar really at all. I moved from license to post-sentence supervision, and I was asking my probation officer, what's the difference then in terms of license to post-sentence supervision? And her answer was, we can't send you straight back to prison. We'd have to go to court to send you back to prison. He sort of said, okay, that's the attitude you're coming to you know, the job with. Now, maybe not all probation officers are like that, and in fairness, she was fine, but, you know, certainly the mentality seemed to be her job was to send me back to prison. She wasn't trying to catch me out or anything, but certainly that seemed to be her number one priority. And I know that, as somebody else said earlier, the narrative is it's all about rehabilitation and resettlement, but my experience hasn't been like that. If anything, they put hurdles in the way of that rather than trying to be helpful or supportive, you know. And also it's a bit of a lottery depending on who you happen to get, you know. It's all down to an individual's personal, you know, application of the rules and how they're going to work, you know. And some of it as well is, I don't really know, you know, there isn't any two-way communication as far as I'd be concerned, you know. I would, they would come in and with nothing, you know, wouldn't even have a piece of paper and a pen to, you know, so if you ask them anything, they sort of say, oh yeah, I'll have to try to remember that, you know, and you just sort of say it just seems to be ticking boxes, you know. Now maybe the stuff goes on in the background that I don't have visibility of, but certainly it didn't seem to be anything that was particularly geared to try and help me. And equally, my view of it was they're not actually going to do anything to help you. They'll point you in directions of other charities that might be able to do something to help, but there isn't really much. And once they pass you off to somebody else, then that's, you know, that's it. They don't really follow up on, are you making any progress?
It's that ticking box mentality that has to come into play a lot of the time, because I moved house and unfortunately changed probation officers just so that I could apply for social housing in my own area. Because if I moved to a different council jurisdiction, it bumped me up a band for the priority levels due to having a local connection in my own area. So when I went to an appointment at this new probation office, I remember saying, right, you know, how can we move forward here? How can we, you know, work together to lower any potential perceived risk levels and actually get moving and progress through this period on license? And the response I was met with was, well, you know, your probation has to come first. So, but you haven't answered the question. And I said, so you just want to see me once a week? Is it because I'm compliant and behave myself to see if you're getting some idiot instead who's going to give you a headache? And for a long time, I actually felt that was the case, to be honest. You know, and it's at the expense of people who are trying to get on with their lives, you know.
The other thing that would be helpful is if they had some mechanism where they could relax some of your license conditions if you were compliant and did everything that they required, you know. Now they might relax it by not having to meet them as frequently, but that gives you something then to work for, and it makes a bit more sense in that you can see some progress yourself, rather than when you come to the end of your license, everything just disappears straight away. If everything has been wound down, now maybe there are things like that, but that wasn't my experience, and there didn't seem to be any sort of, you know, somebody was talking earlier about a sentence plan. You know, I ended up with getting a new probation officer for my last visit, and she said, okay, what's in your sentence plan? And I said, nobody's given me a sentence plan. And she said, did you not have objectives to work to and a lot of things to do? I said, maybe I did, but nobody shared them with me. So I used to just go in, and every week was, what have you been doing last week? How have you been getting on? Fine. How are you getting on trying to get a job? Working away at it, you know. It was just, you know, if I went down to the pub for a pint with them, it would be as entertaining and productive.
Well, it's that tool. Sometimes attending a lot of the appointments, especially in the digital age.
I think that's half to do with the case.
Yeah. You know, it's sort of, it could be seen as a welfare check, getting people into the office, but you think nowadays, you know, a lot of the time you could have a video call, you know, which would suffice. You know, because I remember when they would ring up during COVID and periodically come out and do a so-called home visit, and I'd wave from my balcony, and I thought, well, why not just get me on a video call? We're in the digital age, and I'll walk you around the house, you know. I mean,
that's what they've done in my area.
Yeah, I mean, I'm the first to have a nose in people's bookcases and things like that on online meetings, you know. But how can we, you know, if a person is released on license, and if it's somebody who's not a life sentence prisoner, so there's an end date to that sentence, would it not make sense for a person to be living and behaving as though they aren't on licence for the last little section of that time? Because I remember when my licence ended, my last appointment was a few days before the end. So just a small little act of rebellion. My last night on licence, I decided to go away for a night away that night and not bother getting a check off probation, because I thought, what we're going to do about it? That was my little last act of rebellion against probation. You know, why can't people be sort of saying, well, hang on, let's jump through all the hoops here, but at the end we need to be living and just showing that we are living a good life. That's a proper sentence being carried out then, isn't it?
Yeah, I'd agree.
If somebody gets
but I think it should be stepped down throughout the sentence. So if you do everything that's supposed to, then this rule gets relaxed, or if you have to, if you're not allowed to stay somewhere one night, then you say, okay, well, you can stay away for one night, and then it can be 2 nights or 3 nights, but whatever the conditions are, that they just start relaxing over time. If you're compliant, then there's an incentive for you to be compliant, rather than just sort of this stupid meeting that you have to go to that's depressing to go to, because it just drags you back into the process.
That's how the system's supposed to be, I think. But like I say, I think it's just purely because there's too much case. Every probation officer's got too many on the caseloads and whatnot, and they haven't got the time, or they just don't like the job. The thick of the job, they just want. Do you know what I mean?
And I'd agree with that as well.
It's just.
I'm sure they're racked up with cases, and I understand from their point of view. If they're slack and then somebody goes out and murders somebody or whatever, they'll be the ones who'll get into the trouble. So there is an element of protecting their own jobs, which I get, but
when
doesn't make it any easier to swallow.
When proceeding through the licence time, just like in real life, you wouldn't let your kids play out till 10 o'clock at night when they're little, but as they get older, they stay out later and later, and till they just stop bothering coming home altogether one day. That's called just progressing through life, just as a person should do when they are on license. But when you do hear about people in certain professions, and they're all going on about their caseloads and how busy they are and everything like that, sometimes I think, well, hang on, have you not got transferable skills? If you hate it that much, why not apply for something else instead of constantly whinging about the job you are doing, And so there's going to be people in certain professions who like to have a whinge about what they're doing regardless anyway all the time. Some people will never be pleased. But then you've also got, in various professions, those colleagues who sit back and do nothing and watch their colleagues not behave professionally and carry out their role in a professional manner. They're really just as bad, in my opinion, because they're not actually putting a stop to the bad practice of others when they could actually say something. But is the culture very much us and them? But I actually believe the us and them culture is the opposite to what I once thought. Once upon a time, I thought it was the inmates and ex-prisoners against the system. Sometimes I think there's too much opposition from the system when it comes to engaging with the people who are behind the door and who've been behind the door, with people. Yes. Oh, well, we've managed to go for 50 minutes and not lose everybody. So shall we? We might apologies again that Mary Claire couldn't turn up. Has anybody got anything to add on the subject? Great. One thing what we normally
do you give any feedback to probation or to when we have a discussion around things like this, or is there any channel back to?
We're trying to grow a lot of things with the network, Thomas, and what we are doing is we do record the meetings and put them on our YouTube channel, and on various occasions when we do actually get called in to discuss things with certain organisations, not the network itself, but Mary Claire and New Leaf CIC in Birmingham has people sitting on various panels and things like that where things are fed back. And also, if anybody does approach us, we can actually say, well, this was said at our event. This is the recording we've got of this. These are the general views, but we're the only sort of lived experience-led criminal justice network there is, and hopefully we'll grow things so we do have a bit more of a footprint. I remember Tom Sculler here, who's in the room. We met last year when Mary Claire hosted a roundtable event regarding prison education. and there was some influential people there. And I'd like to think what we discussed at that meeting had some sort of clout when it came to allowing prisoners to serve apprenticeships, which we were discussing, you know.
Adam, can I quickly jump on top of what you just said there, mate?
Yeah.
I'm just going to put something up in the chat here.
Okay.
I've just extracted that from the probation inspectorate's website here. What they do, Thomas, is they encourage people who have had some dealings with the probation service on license or some sort of community order. They encourage them to get in touch, and they listen to what they've got to say.
Yep.
I mean, I've done it. I've been doing it for the last couple of years. I have my contact within the probation inspectorate, and we email each other. I mean, I point out what I think are the flaws within the system, is my experience of them, and I'm not sure what they're going to do with it. I mean, I'm guessing it's going to take some form or other in the longer term, but does that answer your question to some extent?
Yeah. No, I was just curious. It's you know, those are very big wheels to turn, so they'll turn very slowly. But
it's lived experience. I mean, I don't know who it was who raised it earlier on. Lived experience is so important, and for so many years it was just ignored. I mean, the intuitive thing is, people with criminal records can't be trusted, but that no longer holds any water.
No, it really doesn't.
Things are changing, I think, aren't they, Adam?
Things are definitely changing, because one time lived experience wasn't thought about, and then this is purely my opinion, lived experience became a little bit of a buzzword, and there was a lot of tokenism going on. Whereas now I think lived experience is actually starting to be truly valued and equitably valued, if you know what I mean. Yeah. So things are improving. One thing I must add, normally we put a survey out for anybody, you know, with a few choices on, for people to vote for the topic of our next event. Yeah. Well, because I'm a scatterbrain, I just forgot to put that together. So if anybody has any suggestions about, it's easier being honest than making excuses up. If anybody has any suggestions for any topics to discuss next month on our meeting on the first Thursday of August, please feel free to email it across, and we'll work on it, you know. So it's all, you know, what it's about. We're net, you know, networks involves its members more than anything else, and should be a platform for its members. And we've got, so far on the mailing list, we've got about 215 people on there now, and representatives from various organisations. So we are starting to grow, and are starting to have that, you know, bit of clout there behind us, which, you know, we must be doing something good, to be honest. So hopefully we'll keep it up. And again, if anybody ever wants to host an event or anything like that and use us as a platform to promote what they're doing, feel free to get in touch, and we'll do it, you know. So, but thanks. Oh, sorry, Tom.
Well, I was just nodding, you know, in support, and also saying Mary Claire's on the steering committee of the PLA, and you know, she channels very effectively, I guess, what she's getting out of your networks, and that's part of our, well, the main rationale for the PLA is to be a sort of way in which lived experience, as well as other types of expertise and knowledge, can get channeled through, and we can form into a voice. So yeah, no, all power to New Leaf, to the elbow. It makes a difference. I can't always say, I mean, Adam, you said we had significant people in the group, and that's what we try and do. Where it goes beyond that is a bit more difficult to control.
Exactly. But again, that's where it sometimes comes down to networking, and what we'll always say about the network. If anybody sort of doesn't know where to get a hold of somebody, you know, we've got to be, you know, careful with GDPR, but there's no harm in setting email introductions up for people if we've got people on the network and things, you know, and actually connecting people, which is what it should be about. You know, that's how the world can, you know, that's how we can actually progress and actually show, you know, this is what we're achieving and this is the road we're going down. You know, so. But no, thanks ever so much, everybody, for coming. And you know, as usual, all feedback gratefully accepted. Thank you. Have a lovely night, everybody. Take care.
Yep. Catch you all next time.
Thank you.
Take care.